There can be no mistake. The people of Rochelle all have an opinion about the railroad and trains. Before the overpass, there were even stronger opinions. The truth is that without the railroads, Rochelle might not exist. When word spread that a rail line would pass through Lane, Rochelle, things began to happen. Horace Kuhn built a large, fashionable hotel. The Lane House, constructed in 1853, stands today on Main Street. Housing, which had primarily been a few cabins along Kite Creek, spread toward the north, and a new business district on Cherry Street Avenue was developed. The Dixon Airline Railroad was a branch of the Galena and Amp Chicago Union Railroad. This was to be a rail line from Chicago to Dixon and later all the way to the Mississippi River. In 1853, train traffic was considerably different than today. The track was not the rails that we see today. There were 4-inch by 6-inch oak beams set on wooden cross ties. The oaken beams were then topped with a steel strap which was 4 inches wide and 3/4 inches thick. For the first 3 years, this was the track the trains ran on. Later, these partial wood and steel rails were replaced with the solid steel rails of today. The first official train to Rochelle was scheduled to arrive January 14th, 1854. The Lane House was ready to welcome the Iron Horse as it steamed into town. The festivities included local dignitaries and a feast of home-cooked foods. The time for the train to arrival came and passed. Soon a telegraph message was received. The train was broken down and sitting near Creston. Not to be dissuaded, the Rochelle Welcome Committee loaded the party into horse-drawn wagons and moved the party from the hotel to the train. Not the most auspicious beginning, but things quickly improved. In Rochelle, new buildings began to spring up. Grain storage units and mills were some of the first arrivals. The predominant crop for this area was oats. Rolled oats was common basic food, and those oats had to be grown, processed, packaged, and then shipped to Chicago. Rochelle became a regional leader in milling, storage, and shipping. Almost every available foot of land along the railroad was covered with grain storage. In 1870, a second major line was developed through Rochelle. The Chicago and Amp, Iowa Railroad ran through Shabbona and Stewart to Rochelle, and then on to Oregon and the Rock River. Spur tracks spread to Rockford, Davis Junction, Flag Station, Kings, Holcomb, and many other communities. By 1881, train traffic had grown to the point where Rochelle passed an ordinance requiring that the crossings on Main Street and Washington Street be manned with a flagman to warn street traffic of train traffic. Later gates were added. These were manually lowered and raised by the flagmen. The railroads were a part of everyday life in the community. When the high school football and track teams traveled to other towns to compete, they traveled by train. If one looks at early football games, they are in a straight line from the Chicago suburbs to Iowa. That line is the rail line. The railroad was also a major factor in the safety of the communities they crossed. In 1887, the village of Kings was threatened by a roaring prairie fire. Wind-driven flames threatened to overrun the community. A call for help was telegraphed to Rochelle and Dixon. The communities loaded shovels, buckets, and more than 100 citizens onto flat cars and were delivered by the railroad to Kings in time to stop the fire at the village limits. When Ashton lost 28 businesses to fire in 1889, it was once again the railroads that delivered equipment and volunteers from the surrounding communities. As an aside, it was in 1880 that the train whistle stuck on a Rockford train. The train whistle was so similar to the fire alarm whistle that Rochelle firefighters responded and spent much of the night searching for the mysterious fire. Dignitaries such as Franklin Roosevelt, Harry Truman, Warren Harding, although deceased, and Theodore Roosevelt all stopped in Rochelle thanks to the railroads, although it was commented that for Harry Truman, a Democrat, no one showed up at the train. The conductor was quoted as saying, "This is Ogle County, so what could be expected?" The first church services in Rochelle were held in an abandoned boxcar on a railroad side track. The Presbyterians held the service in 1854. Other church groups followed the Presbyterian example, and the boxcar saw many a varied church service as permanent structures were constructed. From oats to sheep, from wood burning to coal engines, the railroads have kept up with the change of demands for more than 175 years. Gone are the days when the train would pull into the Rochelle station on Main Street and the passengers would disembark and begin helping the train crew load wood for the boilers. The brakeman, who frequently was missing more than one finger, would hand-pull pins from couplers to drop off cars. The flagman has been replaced by electronic gates. Passenger service has come and gone. But one thing has never changed. Love them or hate them. The railroads are here to stay and have had a continuing influence on Rochelle and so many other communities in our area.